So what if that overwhelming urge you get, to just quit your job or maybe abandon some massive project or, I don't know, throw your study materials right out the nearest window? What if that isn't actually a sign of weakness?
Oh, that's a wild thought.
Right. Like, what if it's actually an acute neurological freeze response? Because, we are constantly fed this narrative that to succeed at anything, you have to just operate like a
Oh,
machine.
yeah, totally. The whole grind culture thing.
Exactly. The culture insists you just push through the pain, ignore the exhaustion, and basically never ever power down. So today we are dismantling that toxic hustle culture. We're doing a deep dive into a really insightful source today, a transcript from the Daily English podcast hosted by Corey and
And
Oris.
it's a great one.
It really is. And on paper, they're talking to English language learners in an episode they called Don't Give Up on Yourself. But honestly, looking at the mechanics of what they teach here, this is a total masterclass for you, the listener, or anyone trying to master a complex skill or, just trying to survive an incredibly heavy week. So, okay, let's unpack this because the distinction they make between toxic grinding and actual perseverance is huge.
Yeah, well, what's fascinating here is that the mechanics of learning a language, they completely mirror the mechanics of tackling any long-term goal. The psychological hurdles are virtually identical across the board.
Which makes sense. The brain is the brain, right?
Right, exactly. And the source immediately tackles this critical distinction between our sort of societal ideal of never giving up
Yeah.
and the reality of genuine perseverance.
Yeah, they paint a pretty harsh picture of that toxic version.
They do. Because the toxic version of never give up, it treats the human mind as if it just has, infinite resources. It demands that you never rest, never cry, and just completely ignore your physical limits.
Which is impossible.
Literally impossible. But perseverance, as they define it, is entirely different. They use this beautiful visual of resilience being like a tree in a strong wind. It bends so it doesn't break.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with speed or this unbroken intensity. It simply means remaining on the path for a long time, even if your forward motion slows to an absolute crawl.
Which is such a relief to hear, honestly. And they illustrate this with a hypothetical student, right? Sophia.
Yes, Sophia. So relatable.
Yeah, so Sophia works this demanding job all day, comes home entirely depleted, but she still wants to study. So she sits down, she opens her textbook, looks at the page, and then just immediately closes it.
We all know that feeling.
Right. But society looks at Sophia and immediately labels her as lazy or unmotivated or just lacking grit. But the source makes this point that reframes everything. Sophia isn't lazy. Her physical and cognitive resources are just entirely spent.
Yeah, we constantly, and I mean constantly, conflate physical and mental exhaustion with some sort of moral failing.
Oh, absolutely.
When we hit a wall, we just assume a lack of willpower. But let's look at what is actually happening in the brain. Sophia is facing what the source calls an uphill battle.
Like walking up a really steep hill with a super heavy bag.
Exactly. And that heavy bag is filled with the compounding weight of obstacles and setbacks. And they distinguish between the two. So obstacles are just the daily friction of life.
Like limited time, financial stress, having to feed your kids.
Right. And then setbacks are those moments where you take one step forward and get pushed 2 steps back. Like, say you sacrifice your entire weekend to study for a certification, and then you still fail the exam.
Ouch. Yeah.
So when you combine that daily grinding friction with sudden setbacks, the brain perceives a massive unmanageable threat to its energy reserves. You basically lose heart.
Are we basically treating the learning process like it's a sprint when it's actually a marathon? We feel guilty for taking a water break, but if you don't take the water break, you literally never finish the race.
That is spot on.
It makes me think of how we treat our tech versus how we treat ourselves. Like if you take your smartphone out in freezing weather and it's trying to run a massive software update on like a 1% battery, it's going to shut down.
Oh, instantly.
Right. And the phone isn't broken, and it definitely isn't lazy. It is just executing a hardwired survival protocol so it doesn't damage the internal hardware. We accept that our devices have battery limits, but then we expect our own brains to run these high-level cognitive updates while running on completely empty.
And that smartphone analogy, it explains the physiological reality of burnout perfectly. The brain is a really energy-intensive organ.
Yeah.
When you're carrying the heavy baggage of those obstacles and setbacks we talked about, your prefrontal cortex, which is the logical decision-making center, it is burning through metabolic resources at just an incredible rate.
So it's basically draining the battery.
Exactly. And when those resources hit a critical low, The brain initiates a freeze response to conserve energy. So that urge to quit, that feeling of just being completely done, it's a protective mechanism. It's not a character flaw.
Okay, so if the desire to quit is just this biological freeze response to save energy, how are we supposed to actually keep moving forward without permanently damaging the system?
Yeah.
Because we can't just tell our brains to ignore the low battery warning.
No, you definitely don't ignore the warning. You change the demands on the system. You make the mountain smaller.
Oh, here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, so the source uses this amazing analogy of a messy room.
Uh,
If you stand in the doorway of a room where every single surface is covered in clutter, and you tell yourself, I have to clean this entire thing right now, what happens?
You want to just lie down on the floor and take a nap.
Right. Because your prefrontal cortex is immediately overwhelmed by the sheer volume of micro decisions. Like, where do I start? Where does this go? The cognitive load is just way too high, which triggers that freeze response we were talking about.
But if you look at that exact same chaotic room
Yeah.
and just tell yourself, you know what, I am only going to organize this one single shelf, the perceived threat just vanishes.
Exactly. The cognitive load drops to a completely manageable level.
Because the brain registers that one specific isolated task as highly survivable.
Yes.
The hosts actually shared this story about a student who described learning a new language as standing at the edge of this giant, terrifying ocean. And she was so intimidated by the sheer volume of what she didn't know that she refused to even touch the water.
Which is such a natural response.
Right. And the advice she received was incredibly practical. They told her, you don't need to swim the ocean today. Just put your feet in.
Just the feet.
Yeah. And for her, putting her feet in literally meant just listening to a 3-minute audio clip while making a cup of tea. That was the entire commitment.
And it works because lowering that barrier to entry entirely bypasses the brain's alarm system.
Mm-hmm.
The source actually highlights this with a story about one of the hosts, Corey.
Oh, right. The meltdown story.
Yeah, Corey hit absolute rock bottom. He was trying to watch this educational video that was supposed to be easy, but he said it sounded like complete space language, just pure, unintelligible noise.
Which is so frustrating.
And on that exact same day, he received a terrible test score. So that is a massive collision of an obstacle and a setback all at once.
The battery is at 0.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Corey's instinct was to just abandon the goal entirely. But instead of officially quitting, he took a tactical retreat. He stepped away for 2 full days, just rested, watched silly videos, and allowed the frustration to process.
Which takes self-awareness.
It does. And when Corey returned, the strategy completely shifted to just 10 minutes a day. That's it. Listening to one short audio clip and sometimes repeating that exact same flip 3 times.
Okay, I have to challenge this 10-minute rule, though, because I hear this advice everywhere, but I'm looking at the scale of massive goals. Like, if you want to actually become fluent in a language or pivot your career into some highly technical field, is 5 to 10 minutes a day actually enough to master something that complex?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right, because part of me wonders, is this just a psychological trick? Like a pacifier we give ourselves so we don't have to admit we basically quit. Because 10 minutes of studying astrophysics is not going to get you a job at NASA.
Okay, it's a vital question. Because, no, 10 minutes alone will not turn you into an expert. However, it is far more than just a psychological trick. It is a neurological necessity during periods of high friction.
What do you mean?
Well, when you are in a state of exhaustion, the goal is no longer the rapid acquisition of new knowledge. The goal shifts to maintaining the neural pathways you've already built and preserving your identity as a learner.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because think about it, when you quit a pursuit entirely for a month because you burned out trying to study for 3 hours a day, the synaptic connections you built actually begin to prune.
Oh, wow. You literally lose the wiring.
Yes. And more importantly, the psychological friction required to restart after a long absence is just massive. But by committing to just 10 minutes a day, you keep that pathway active. You are continuing to lay down myelin on those specific neural circuits.
You're keeping the lights on.
Exactly. And you're also building a crucial track record of consistency and self-trust. You're proving to yourself that you can show up. And once that period of burnout passes and your energy reserves replenishes, you already have the daily habit built, which makes scaling back up to an hour or more feel completely effortless. Consistency over perfection, right?
So you're basically keeping the engine idling so it doesn't freeze over in the middle of winter. You aren't trying to win a race today, you just don't want the car to die.
That's a great way to look at it.
But, I mean, shrinking the external workload down to 10 minutes feels like it only addresses the physical schedule. You can idle the engine all you want, but if you have a driver inside the car who is constantly smashing the dashboard and screaming that the trip is a total disaster, you are still going to crash.
Oh, absolutely. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the source material addresses this directly by examining the inside battle.
The mindset stuff.
Yeah, because lowering the external cognitive load is completely useless if you just replace it with a massive internal cognitive load. The internal monologue, the story you constantly tell yourself, can actually generate more friction than any external setback.
Yeah, they had that great analogy about the movie soundtrack.
Yes. They compare negative self-talk to watching a movie with a highly depressing soundtrack playing in the background. You could be watching this beautifully shot, happy scene, but if the background music is tense and mournful, the entire experience just feels heavy and ominous.
It ruins the whole scene. If you are constantly looping thoughts like, I'm behind, or I'm not smart enough for this, or I'm failing, it colors every single interaction you have with your goal.
It really does.
Even when you make a breakthrough or you finally grasp a difficult concept, the victory feels totally hollow because that miserable soundtrack is still playing in your head.
And we really have to look at how the brain processes that negative soundtrack. When you harshly criticize yourself, your brain actually doesn't distinguish between an external attacker and an internal one.
Wait, really? It treats them the same?
It does. It perceives a legitimate threat. So it activates the sympathetic nervous system and pumps stress hormones like cortisol straight into your bloodstream. So think about what's happening. Your brain is simultaneously trying to dedicate processing power to learning a complex new skill while also diverting heavy resources to defend against the emotional attack you are launching on yourself.
That is wildly inefficient.
It is the definition of inefficient, which is why the source suggests these practical mechanical reframes to stop the drain. So instead of categorizing yourself by saying, I'm stupid after a failure, you categorize the event itself by saying, this is a setback.
Right. Or changing, I'm terrible at this to, I'm nervous, but I am learning. It's like, I always look at this internal dynamic, like dealing with a horrific sports coach.
Oh, I like that.
Because imagine if you joined a new team and on the very first day, a real-life coach followed you around the field screaming the exact phrases you say to yourself in your head.
Oh my gosh, it would be awful.
Right. Telling you that you are hopelessly behind, that everyone else is faster, that you should probably just go home. You would walk off the field and quit immediately. And no one would blame you. Yet we allow our internal coach to berate us all day, every day, and we somehow wonder why we feel exhausted. We have to become our own encouraging coach. We have to fire the toxic one.
We really do. But, the environment outside your head matters just as much as the one inside. The source brings up this vital principle. Do not fight alone.
Yes, curating that external circle.
They recount this story of a listener who left a comment expressing just deep, deep frustration. She genuinely believed she was the absolute only person in her entire city struggling to grasp the material, and that isolation just amplified her despair.
But then people responded, right?
Yeah. Right beneath her comment, hundreds of other learners replied saying, me too. And suddenly, her struggle wasn't this personal defect anymore. It was a shared, completely normalized part of the process.
And that shared community also provides perspective when you kind of lose your own. One of the hosts showed a story about hitting a wall and texting a friend that they were ready to give up. And the friend texted back 5 words that honestly should be printed on billboards. They said, "You are tired, not useless."
Tired, not useless. It's so powerful.
Think about how often high achievers blend those two concepts together.
All the time.
Yeah.
High achievers frequently anchor their entire sense of identity and self-worth to their current level of output. So when their physiological energy drops, their output drops. And because they view their value entirely through the lens of productivity, a temporary lack of energy is immediately interpreted as a permanent lack of value.
Which is so dangerous.
Very. But that phrase, tired, not useless, it severs that connection entirely. It correctly identifies the problem as a temporary deficit in metabolic energy, which, by the way, can easily be solved with rest, rather than a permanent defect in character, which can't be solved at all.
And the source also touches on the concept of influence, right? Like actively avoiding people who bring you down.
Yeah.
The energy vampire.
Exactly. Like the study partner who only ever points out your errors and makes you feel smaller.
Yeah.
They say you have to treasure and pull closer to the people who lift you up. But okay, let's play this out for a second. Let's say I have done it all. I have shrunk my massive goal down to a manageable 10 minutes a day. I have successfully fired my toxic internal coach. I've surrounded myself with a community that reminds me I am tired, not useless.
You're doing great.
Right. I've done all the right things. But what happens if I sit down, I look at the project, and it is still completely unworkable? Like I'm still just hitting a brick wall. Is there ever a point where throwing in the towel actually is the most logical answer?
Well, this raises an important question about how rigid we are with our goals, because we often assume that if a specific plan fails, the entire overarching dream is invalid. But the source introduces this deeply liberating concept. You can change the plan without changing the dream.
Okay, I love that. They use a highly functional analogy. Imagine you set out on this really long walk to a specific destination, and halfway there, the shoes you're wearing start causing severe blisters. You're in immense pain. Your response to that pain isn't to sit down on the side of the road and declare, I am a failure and I will never walk again.
Right. You'd just be like, these shoes are awful.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You simply acknowledge that the shoes are the wrong tool for the job and you change your footwear. Changing your method is not a failure.
But we hold on to bad plans like a badge of honor sometimes.
We really do.
Like if your original strategy was to read a dense, dry grammar book for 3 hours every evening and you find yourself absolutely dreading the end of the day, the dream wasn't the problem, and your intellect isn't the problem either. The problem is the textbook.
Yes.
The source phrased it hilariously, actually. They said that sometimes your body is at the table, but your soul is at the beach.
That is so true.
If your soul has abandoned the mission, you are wearing the wrong shoes.
Yeah.
You have to pivot. Listen to podcasts, watch a documentary, find a tutor.
And yet we fall into the sunk cost fallacy so often. We invest so much time into a specific method that we feel compelled to stick with it, even when it is actively harming our progress. True discipline is so often misunderstood as this rigid, unyielding adherence to a miserable plan. But psychological flexibility, the ability to objectively assess that a tool is failing and pivot to a new one without ego, that is the actual hallmark of resilience. It's wisdom, not weakness.
So what does this all mean for the day-to-day? We have these new flexible tools. We are moving forward, but the steps are agonizingly small because we've shrunk the mountain down to 10 minutes a day. How do we actually stay motivated when the massive milestones like getting a promotion or finally passing the board exams are still months or years away?
Well, the source offers a daily practice they call the 10-second pat on the back. You have to intentionally track and celebrate the micro wins.
Why 10 seconds?
It is deeply rooted in how the brain's reward circuitry functions. If you only ever celebrate the massive milestones, you are basically starving your brain of dopamine for months at a time. And dopamine isn't just a chemical that makes you feel happy. It is the brain's primary mechanism for reinforcing behavior.
Oh, so it's a training tool.
Exactly. When you acknowledge a small win like successfully understanding a joke in another language or ordering a coffee in your head or maintaining your composure during a stressful meeting, and you intentionally let yourself feel proud for just 10 seconds, you trigger a dopamine release.
And what does that do?
The dopamine acts as a neurological save button. It tells your brain, hey, whatever behavior we just did, remember it and wire the brain to do it again. The hosts of the source material actually keep a running small wins list on their phones just to consciously trigger this reinforcement loop.
Now, I have to bring up a famous phrase the source mentioned because it perfectly encapsulates this entire deep dive. We all know the old cliche, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. It is the ultimate hustle culture battle cry. But the host offered an incredibly honest and frankly better revision. They said, when the going gets tough, I get snacks.
Best revision ever.
I relate to that on a spiritual level.
Well, and it works. Grabbing a snack, taking a walk, or stepping away to just breathe are highly effective ways to regulate a spiked nervous system. You are physically stepping out of the fight or flight response.
But you don't just eat the snack and quit for the day.
No. The critical nuance the source adds is that, yes, you take the break, you get the snack, but you follow it up with just your required 10 minutes of focus afterward. You soothe the nervous system without abandoning the overarching mission.
You bend so you don't break. So to bring all of this together for you, if you are staring at a massive undertaking today and you feel that heavy, paralyzing urge to just walk away from it all, recognize what is actually happening. You are allowed to power down and rest. You are absolutely allowed to change your direction and find a pair of shoes that actually fit. But you do not have to throw your ultimate dream in the trash just because the friction today was high. Take their advice. Notice one small win today, write it down, and just allow yourself to feel genuinely proud of it for exactly 10 seconds.
And I want to leave you with one final thought regarding that intense, overwhelming friction you feel right before you want to quit. We universally interpret the frustration of staring at a problem we can't solve as a signal that we're failing. But let's look at the biology for a second. What if that precise feeling of intense mental strain, the sheer frustration that makes you want to close the book or slam the laptop shut, what if that isn't a sign of failure at all? What if it is the literal biological sensation of your brain actively rewiring itself to accommodate a new skill? What if that intense desire to quit is the exact moment the upgrade is taking place?
Wow. If the frustration is literally just the feeling of the upgrade installing, you definitely don't want to rip the power cord out of the wall before it finishes. So the next time your brain drafts a resignation letter, force it to take a water break, give it a snack, and stick around for the upgrade to complete. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. See you next time.